And welcome to Blackstone Intelligence. I am Jake Morphonios. Good to see you all this evening. We are going to be talking tonight about the two-state solution and how Israel, through its settlement program, pretty much has wiped out any hope of ever having uh, a two-state solution, at least in the way that so many people have worked toward for so many years. We'll take a look at that. So as people are joining in here, looks like we've got several dozen of you. Hit the like button as you come in, and throughout the stream, if you want to do a super chat, sorry you can't do it because I don't get any kind of monetization or advertising revenue from YouTube. So you can go to buymeacoffee.com/blackstoneintel to chip in a couple dollars there. I would appreciate it. You can refill my Palestinian ceramic coffee cup here. You can also go to patreon.com/blackstoneintel if you'd like to become a patron. paypal.me/blackstoneintel. Welcome to all of you in the chat. Good to see you. I am going to be paying a little bit of attention to the chat as we go through. Excuse me. Marvin asked, am I on Rumble? Yes, I am on Rumble. Kind of newly so. Excuse me, I've only done a few videos on there or uploaded a few videos. My goal, though, is to this weekend do a couple test live streams on Rumble and start uploading more content there. Some of you may or may not be on Brighteon, which is Mike Adams, the health ranger guy. When he got kicked off YouTube some years ago, when they were doing one of the big purges, he set up Brighteon, which is kind of an alternative. I'm on there as well, but again, I've only got a couple of videos up. Brighteon.com/ I don't know if it's /BlackstoneIntel or something, but you can search for Blackstone Intel, and I'm on there. I did an interview with Mike a couple of days ago, and that's going to be posted in the next few days. Unfortunately, I can't share that video here on YouTube. And here's why. YouTube has got a very punitive system, which I learned about some years ago. After Alex Jones had been booted off, I had posted on YouTube just a 30-second clip of him when he was screaming about something Donald Trump had done that he didn't like. And I thought it was humorous. So I put it up, or I used that clip, and I got a community standard strike, which was ridiculous, and I couldn't figure out why. There was no policy at the time to explain, but in the years after, YouTube came out with this explanation that if anyone who has ever been on YouTube gets booted off of YouTube, you cannot show their stuff. You cannot play clips from their old stuff. You can't play anything of their new things if they're making content somewhere else. You cannot have them on as a guest. You can't talk about if say Alex Jones came on my show and we wanted to talk about jump roping, that would get me a strike. It's an extremely punitive thing. I just went through, I did a YouTube training where you can try and get a strike removed by going through their training. And it tells you all this stuff, teaches you all this stuff, and then you have to answer the questions. And all of the questions are basically giving you scenarios where if you ever use content in any way or use that person in any way, what happens? And you have to click, I get a strike, I get in trouble. You become a persona non grata when you get booted off of YouTube. And so that is why I will not be able to post clips from that interview on Brighteon TV, but I will probably post some clips of it on Rumble, and I will also give access to that interview to my Patreon subscribers. Patrons will get it. So that's another reason there. I'm going to be boosting a lot more material for those who are chipping in. I think it's only fair. One other thing that I would encourage you to do is, in fact, let me look real quick here, see if I can get you a link. I'll put it in the chat. Okay, I am going to start posting material to uh, Substack. I'm going to start a newsletter on Substack. I just put in the chat a link, blackstoneintel.com. I'm sorry, blackstoneintel.substack.com. Please go there and subscribe. I have a paid option, but also a free option. So go there and subscribe, and you'll get some updates from me. All right, so let's go ahead and jump in. Oh, Cali Girl is in the chat, says, "Hi, how are you? Very happy that you're back. Already donated to you from PayPal. Thank you so much, Cali Girl. I do appreciate it. Tip my hat to you." And I'm going to go ahead and jump in here. Moderators, you can take care of the chat. I'll trust your decisions there. We're going to be talking about what's going on in the Palestinian territories. Now, you are well aware of the atrocities that have been committed in Gaza. Not as much attention has been given to what's going on in the West Bank, though, and that's what I want to talk about tonight. And what prompted me to think about this a little bit is I saw some posts from a few people I know saying that the IDF just went into Jenin, which is in the very northern part of the West Bank, and they cut the power, and they're in there killing people in the West Bank up in Jenin. Jenin is a place dear to my heart because it's a place where Blackstone, we donated a lot of olive trees a couple of years ago. Olive trees that had been cut down by the violent settlers. We chipped in, and among the places that some of our 1,100, 1,200 olive trees were planted was in Jenin. So it really pisses me off to see that that Israel is in there. But you know what? If they knock down any of the trees, we'll just put them right back up. Not going to keep us down. But let's talk about the West Bank. West Bank is Palestinian territory that's on the western side of the Jordan River, and that's where it gets its name from. And while we do have very clear ethnic cleansing going on in Gaza, there have been increasing raids in the West Bank by the Israeli military since October 7th. And this is literally raids on people's homes in the middle of the night. It's happening on a daily basis. Now, this is not anything new. This has been going on for years. And I talked to some people. I interviewed some Palestinians when I was over there who have experienced this. People that go home, they're just normal people. And the Israeli security forces, the IDF, will come through and pound on a door in the middle of the night and demand that the people open the door, which they have to, because if you don't open the door, they'll kick it down. But either way, whether you open the door for them or they kick it down, they come in guns blazing. They are heavily armed. They come in with their uh, rifles pointed at the family, and it's in the dark. They often cut the power before they go in, um, but they go in and they demand that the parents get all the children up, and they line everyone up. And you'll see videos of this. There's plenty of videos that have been recorded that you can find on, well, I don't know if it's on YouTube, but probably some. But they line them all up and they'll start saying, all right, show me the papers. Get me the papers for this kid. Get me the papers for this kid. And if you don't have whatever documentation they're looking for, they will arrest that child or that person, that family member, on the spot and haul them out and take them to prison. And the Palestinians are subjected to military tribunals. They don't get evidence of their crimes, sometimes never, and they can sit there languishing in these prisons for months to years with no formal charges brought against them. That's just part of the apartheid system. So, in addition to increasing raids on Palestinian homes in the last year, because these settler attacks and raids on homes have spiked since the new Netanyahu administration took control back in December. And that's one of the things that has prompted this attack by Hamas, because things have gotten so much worse since Netanyahu returned to power. But you've got the raids in the middle of the night. There are increases of arrests of people whose only crimes are that they are living on lands that have been, they're lands that Israel wants to take, and that's their crime. There have been more killings of Palestinians on the street by Israeli security forces, but there's also been huge increases in attacks on Palestinian farmers, primarily by surrounding settlers, people who want to go in and take the land away from these Palestinians, who have often lived on the same land for generations. Certainly is not the land that belongs to Israel. This is in the West Bank. So these settlers come in and screaming about how God has given them as the chosen race the property. So that has increased. And you've got entire communities of Palestinians that are being driven off of their lands at gunpoint. Now, after they're out, either the settlers go in and take control of those properties, or what also happens is that the Israeli Defense Forces bring in their armored bulldozers, the kind of bulldozers that they use to kill, what's her name, back in 2004, was it? The peace activist, Rachel Corrie, broke her back, killed her, because she was standing there in front of a Palestinian home that they wanted to bulldoze. So they'll come in, drive the people out, bulldoze the homes, flatten the land, and then build colonial settlements on top of them. And then they attach roads that the Palestinians can't use that connect these various settlements. So anyway, you may be familiar with the term pogrom, very common in the World War II decades, around the World War II years, leading up to it in the 30s, throughout the 40s. Throughout Europe, Jews were rounded up and either driven out or killed. A pogrom is basically a when mobs of people, whether they're angry over whatever it is, mobs of people get together and they go after another group to either drive them out or kill them. And pogroms were very common in Poland and other places in Europe. And the Jews suffered a lot of persecution. This is very much a part of their historical experience. The problem is that they are now the ones doing it. They're doing it to the Palestinians. It's like they experienced these atrocities against them, and somehow it got into their DNA, and they took it not as a lesson to learn from, to never let this happen to any other people again. It's more like they use their experience as an instruction manual on how to turn around and do it to another people. And that's what they're doing. They are driving the Palestinians out, but the settlers are also going around and killing people, multiple people, entire families. And the Palestinians have had troubles for years with violence from these settlers. They go into the olive orchards, orchards that there's just no way to say that they could possibly belong to the settlers. Because, like I said, they've been in Palestinian families for years and years and years. But the settlers go in, they destroy the ability of the farmers to keep earning income from the land, primarily the olive harvest, the olive trees. And so when you cut down these olive trees, they take a long time to grow to where they can produce fruit that can be sold. Well, if you can't do it, you end up having to relocate to find work elsewhere. You can't plant trees there and wait around, go off somewhere else, work, and then come back. Because in the meantime, while you're off working someone else, they come in and they take control of the land. So I mentioned a couple of years ago, Blackstone, our Blackstone network, we raised about $9,000 and paid for 1,184 new olive trees to replace ones that had been cut down by the settlers. But these settlers just keep returning with their guns, with their chainsaws. They come in with axes. And they often have heavily armed Israeli military escorts. So it's never a fair fight. Not only are the Palestinian people, the average people, unarmed because they're not allowed to have weapons. So they can't defend their properties. That's why you always see them out there either throwing rocks or using slingshots to try and fight back. But when you've got the armed settlers coming in and they're protected by the armed Israeli military, they stand no chance. So since October 7th, things have actually gotten a lot worse. Things have gotten really bad for people in the West Bank. We're just going to set Gaza aside for a minute because we all know how unbelievably nightmarish conditions are there. But in the West Bank, the settlers are killing Palestinians, and part of the reason is because they can see that they can get away with murder without consequence. That is the lesson the international community has taught to these violent people, because they can see if the United States government, the British government, the governments of the West, who are always touting how we are the most moral countries on the earth, we're more enlightened, we're more civilized than those barbaric Arab nations. If we, the ones who claim the moral high ground, can stand by and enable Israel to commit mass murder on an industrial scale, who is there to stand up to these murderers in Israel? Nobody. Who is it that is going to stop these smaller scale pogroms and these acts of violence by the settlers? There is nobody. Nobody can do it for them. I have never been more ashamed of my government in my entire life than I am right now, as the U.S. government stands by. Today, the Senate Republicans on their Twitter account tweeted out, "No ceasefire." I mean, how the hell can the leaders of the Republican Party, who are always talking about we're against the Ukraine war, and you've got the Democrats. I'm not talking about the progressive wing, but the old school Democrats, the Joe Bidens and Hillary Clintons. They're no different from the Republicans. Even a lot of the so-called progressives like Bernie Sanders are saying, no, we don't want a ceasefire. I have never been so ashamed of my government. And let me tell you, I have been ashamed of a hell of a lot of things that my government has done. Let's take a look at a map here. I'm going to bring this up. It'll take me just a second to spin this around. And we are going to talk some about this. All right. So the West Bank, if you look at the whole region here, from the top up here, this is across the border, that's southern Lebanon. And then down here is the Sinai Peninsula, that's Egypt. Over here is Jordan. Up here is Syria. But you've got this territory here. The part in red is the West Bank, and then down here is the Gaza Strip. Okay. Now, the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, after 1967, it was all militarily occupied by Israel and has been ever since. Now, in 2006, I think it was, 2005, 2006, Prime Minister Ariel Sharon decided to pull the settlements, the Israeli settlements. There were about 8,500 Israelis living in illegal settlements in Gaza. He decided to pull them out, and the military changed tactics. Instead of occupying Gaza, what they did was they came out, they built barriers outside of it and closed it and turned it into what you often hear an open air prison, or more accurately, a giant concentration camp. So you'll sometimes hear people say, oh, Gaza's not under occupation. And you could say, all right, technically it's not occupation if you don't have the military in there. But when you have the military along this fake border. There is no real border to Gaza. This is something that Israel has created. And you prevent the people from being able to leave. You prevent them from being able to import any kind of goods. You prevent people from being able uh, to do anything. Well, what's the difference? It's still an occupation. But over here in the and right now, of course, it's certainly occupied because Israeli forces are back in there. So we turn over here to the West Bank, and you would think, looking at it, wow, that's a lot of land that Palestinians live in. I don't have one of the maps to show you right now, but there are actually only tiny little pieces of the West Bank where Palestinians have any autonomy. They've been, we'll just go through it. We'll go through it. So I'm just going to talk about the West Bank here. You've got about 3 million Palestinians within the West Bank borders. And it is governed by a type of government that was set up during the 1990s. The Oslo Accords established something called the Palestinian Authority. It's kind of like a mini government, a practice government, an interim government that was set up that was supposed to lead toward, ultimately toward independence, independent governance for the Palestinians. But it is led by a guy named Mahmoud Abbas, President Abbas. President Abbas is a crony collaborator. His real job is not to govern. His real job is to keep the Palestinians quiet, to quell any resistance. He routinely works with Israeli security forces to conduct raids against Palestinians to keep them suppressed. And I know this. When I was over there, I had two experiences. One, when I was in Ramallah. Ramallah is, if you go up here, Ramallah is kind of the de facto capital of the Palestinian Authority. That's where they're at. East Jerusalem is the goal to have as their capital. But for the meantime, they operate in Ramallah. So when I was in Ramallah, one of the places that I stayed, one of the hotels that I stayed at, is overlooking the center of the city. Nice little hotel. In fact, is this? Let's see. Oh yeah, it's right around there. I don't know if I should say the name of the hotel. It probably doesn't matter. It's the Royal, what was that? The Royal Arch or the Royal something hotel. I'll have to look it up. I've posted about it before. But I would at night, I'd go home to the hotel at night and I'd look out and I would see um, they're not supposed to go in. The Israeli security forces are not supposed to push into Ramallah. It's supposed to be governed by the Palestinians, by Palestinian security. But I, from my balcony, looked out and saw Israeli security forces driving along in there, racing along with Palestinian security forces helping them. That is what Mahmoud Abbas does, is he coordinates with Israeli security forces anytime they want to get in there and cause trouble. And I had dinner with the mayor of Ramallah, Musa Hadid. And while we were eating dinner, he's sitting there with an armed bodyguard behind him. And it was crazy. He was talking to me about how he was expecting before the morning to be arrested by Israel. Because Israel had arrested him a few times before, and I don't know if he got arrested that night, but he did get arrested after that. They trump up any charges. It's constant harassment. But anyway, so I know from personal experience, seeing the conditions there, that in the West Bank, they don't have control. They have a semblance of control. But Mahmoud Abbas is a collaborator with the Israeli government. They don't have any elections. There's no political mechanism to challenge the authority of Mahmoud Abbas. And this is exactly what Israel helped to bring about. This is what they did. This is why they were funding the political rival of the Fatah party. Fatah is secular. There are Christians. In fact, I think Musa Hadid is Christian. I'm not positive, but I'm pretty sure he is. But there are several legislators that in the Palestinian Authority that are Christian. But the purpose of Israel funding Hamas and helping them to grow in power was so that they could split the unity movement. Because Hamas is an Islamist party. They don't want to cooperate with Fatah. They want to control everything. So let's jump back for a minute here for the West Bank. I'm going to explain kind of how the system works, how the territory works. Back in the 1990s, there was a huge push to make major gains toward the Palestinian people having a state of their own, resolving this insane conflict once and for all. Bill Clinton, to his credit, mediated high-level negotiations between Yasser Arafat, who was the chairman of the Palestinian Liberation Organization, the PLO. The PLO is the only body that speaks for all of the Palestinians, not just the Palestinian people who are in the West Bank and Gaza, but also the millions of Palestinians that are living in refugee camps in southern Lebanon, down in the Sinai, in Egypt, over in Syria, over in Jordan. The PLO speaks for all of them. So you've got Yasser Arafat, and then you've got the Israeli prime minister, who is Yitzhak Rabin. Rabin was not one of the far-right politicians. He was more moderate, more left wing, I guess, if you could say that. Now, they eventually settled on a plan that was going to lead toward Palestinian statehood. And the goal was to reach full statehood in about 5 or so years. So they set up this interim government to prepare for that, called the Palestinian Authority. And as part of the Oslo Accord deal, what they did was they took the West Bank and they split it into 3 zones. 3 areas: Area A, Area B, and Area C. So Palestinians were given autonomy, control over Area A. That made up about 18% of the West Bank. Area B, and it's not like one big chunk of the West Bank. It's a bunch of little pieces of the West Bank where the major population centers are. Okay, then you've got Area B. Area B was supposed to be joint control, joint security control between the Palestinians and the Israelis. But the truth is, Israel has its military there. They're the ones in charge. Then you have Area C, which was the largest of the 3 zones by far. Even though it's in the West Bank, that remained under full Israeli control. The goal of these negotiated agreements, the reason Arafat went along with this, is that this was supposed to be a stepping stone to full Palestinian statehood. But while this is going on, while Yitzhak Rabin was negotiating with Arafat, the far-right element, which is the majority of Israel, they did not want this. And one guy who wanted to be in there was Benjamin Netanyahu. Remember, this is back in the 90s. He took advantage of the anger that the far right had, and he used that anger to propel efforts to undermine the Oslo Accords. And after the Accords, an extremist settler actually assassinated Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin, killed him, shot him, because Rabin had the audacity to try and make peace with the Palestinians. Those are the people who are loyal to Netanyahu. Well, they are loyal to Netanyahu only if Netanyahu is carrying out the agenda. If Netanyahu was to try and seek peace, he'd be gone too. They'd assassinate him too. So ever since this time, ever since the Oslo Accords, uh, from that point forward, Israel has moved further and further into this insane atmosphere of bloodlust, this desire for full ethnic cleansing, of genocide of the Arab Palestinian population. It has always been the goal of the Zionists to prevent the establishment of a Palestinian state. And this is clearly evident from the heavy push to build Jewish settlements that are peppered all throughout the West Bank, all over the place. These Jewish settlements are deemed illegal by most of the governments of the world. In fact, you know what? Give me a second. Let me look around here and see if I can find a picture to show you. Bear with me a second. Maybe there's something on Twitter I can find real quick. I'm saying maps, but I want to find one, a clear one. Let's see here. Let me go ahead and bring up Twitter here while I'm scrolling through so you can see what I'm looking at as I go through. Trying to find one that makes it clear, that shows the pieces of the. There's a little one. That's not. Oh, that's not what I want. You can kind of see on the map there, but even that is way more, way more settlement territory than they have now. Let's see. Can't see that one very well. West Bank. Oh, okay. Maybe this one. Let me make sure you can see this. All right, so you've got the West Bank. I'm looking for a date on this to see. I don't see it. It's a couple years old at least. It still doesn't show the settlements. Let's see. What about this? Oh well. Sorry about that. I should have looked this up before I started. Yeah, there's one. You can kind of see the pieces. This is from 2020. These are settlements. I don't see any others. I'll post it to Twitter. Listen, if you don't follow me yet on Twitter, please go to twitter.com/blackstoneintel. Blackstone Intel. My main channel, or my main account, is Morphonios, which has got about 20 something thousand followers, but it doesn't. I can't get any coverage. In fact, this little channel, Blackstone Intel, gets way more views. In fact, I looked it up today, and it gets twice as many views with less than 1,000 followers. I get twice as many views with that than I do the one with 20,000 followers, because of what Twitter has done to suppress my stuff. Go to twitter.com/blackstoneintel. Follow me there. But anyway, settlements. You've got these Jewish settlements peppered all throughout the West Bank. These settlements are not legal. They're illegal. And that's not my opinion. Almost every government in the world, except for a couple of them, hundreds of countries say that these settlements are illegal. It is illegal under Geneva Conventions. It's illegal under international law. It's been recognized as illegal by the nations, even in the Security Council, passing resolutions. The U.S. government, the official position of the U.S. government, has always been that the settlements are illegal. Trump tried to change that to because he, really loves Netanyahu and was trying to curry favor. But anyway, these settlements have chopped up the West Bank so that the large concentrations of Palestinians are separated from each other by these huge Israeli settlements. And like I mentioned earlier, there are these roads that are called flyovers that connect the settlements, one settlement to the next. Palestinians can't use those roads. You've got military outposts all over the West Bank. You've got barrier walls. You've got barbed wire fences all over. It splices up the West Bank with hundreds of checkpoints to prevent the Palestinian people from being able to engage in any meaningful commerce in any way that could build up their collective economy. They want to keep the Palestinians economically crippled, completely crippled. And so these barrier walls run through. You'll have a Palestinian farmer who owns acreage and he's got olive trees on it. And what they did was they came along and they built walls through the middle of people's lands. It's like this. They wove it in and out purposely to cut farmers off from their own properties. Sometimes they can go to a checkpoint and get permission to cross through to the rest of their property. But they have to stand in line. Even for that, they have to stand in line for hours. This is apartheid. They want to keep, and not only that, the reason you've got all of these settlements, you've got all of these roads, you've got all of the checkpoints and barriers is because for a society to grow, for a society to develop, you have to have trade, you have to have commerce, you have to be able to interact with each other. Well, by doing what they've done, they've made it virtually impossible for huge sections of the West Bank to engage in trade and commerce with one another. And that keeps the economy crippled. And the purpose of the settlements, it's not like this is ambiguous. The political party of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, it's called the Likud party. Their party platform, the official party platform, rejects the possibility of the creation of a Palestinian state. It recommends in the party platform that settlement building be used as a tool to prevent a Palestinian state from ever being achieved. Let me read you a quote here. This is from the Likud party platform. Quote, Judea, which is the southern part, and Samaria, which is what they call the West Bank, will not be handed to any foreign administration. Between the sea and the Jordan, there will only be Israeli sovereignty. Remember that phrase. Between the sea and the Jordan, there will only be Israeli sovereignty. So, in other words, the official position of the party of the prime minister is that Israel will never allow Palestinian control of the West Bank. And that from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea, from the river to the sea, there will only be Jewish political control. Does that sound like these people want peace? You hear so much. The Palestinians are always criticized about this, and you hear it in mainstream media all the time right now. They say, Palestinians are out there, students on campuses are saying, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. And they insist, you know what that means? That means Palestinians want to kill all Jews. They want a new Holocaust. They want to kill them all. That's totally false. That is not what the phrase means. But they don't apply it. Okay, fine. Let's say that is what it means. The party of Benjamin Netanyahu, that's in their platform. Why is CNN, why is MSNBC, why is the BBC not asking the Israeli diplomats and the people they have on representing Israel, why is it that the position of your ruling party is the utter annihilation and eradication from the river to the sea of the Palestinians? Since the party platform is talking about from the river to the sea, it's ethnic cleansing that you want, right? I mean, surely CNN is going to be balanced and ask that of the Israeli side, right? Let me read you another thing from the Likud party platform. Quote, under the heading for settlement. Settlement, both urban and rural, in all parts of the land of Israel. Settlement is the focal point of the Zionist effort to redeem the country, to maintain vital security areas, and serve as a reservoir of strength and inspiration for the renewal of the pioneering spirit. The Likud government will call on the younger generation in Israel and the dispersions to settle and help every group and individual in the task of inhabiting and cultivating the wasteland. So the wasteland is the land that the Palestinians are living on. They control the amount of water that Palestinians are able to use on their own farms, so it makes it very hard to turn it green. The water is diverted to the settlements, so they call it a wasteland. And we can turn it into, make it flower like the rose. So today, right now, there are hundreds of thousands of Israeli Jews living in illegal settlements throughout the West Bank. So I said earlier, back in 2005, Prime Minister Ariel Sharon, who was a butcher who slaughtered, he was the guy who was in charge of the military when Israel invaded Lebanon and butchered 20,000 people. Sharon pulled the 8,500 settlers out of Gaza. Now, when he did this, and I remember it well because I was covering this kind of stuff even back then, writing about it, it almost tore Israeli society apart. People were furious. It's a miracle that Sharon did not suffer the same fate that Yitzhak Rabin did. You had the Israeli military having to go into Gaza to these Jewish settlements and fight to get the Jews out of it. The Jewish settlers are extremists. They believe that God has given them this mission to take back all the land. And when you have religious motivation, whether it's the Muslims, Christians during the Crusades, or the Jews today taking the territories, when you have the fanatical zeal that comes from believing that your God wants you to commit atrocities, it's very hard to persuade you using reason or logic or compassion. So you've got Israel, the government, fighting against their own citizens to get them out. That was 8,500 people. And it nearly led to civil war. So the idea that somehow today the Israeli government could go into the West Bank and uproot and eject 700,000 Jewish settlers is unfathomable. That's not even including the 200,000 illegal settlers that are living in the Palestinian territory of East Jerusalem, because the Jews want to take all of Jerusalem for themselves. So you'll hear a lot of talk about a one-state solution or a two-state solution. Let's talk about the two-state solution. The idea that Jews can have one state and the Palestinians can have another state right next door. And that you take all of the settlers out of the lands that they're currently in illegally occupying in the Palestinian territories, that you remove these roads or at least turn control of the roads over to the Palestinians. The Palestinians have full control of all of this, right? That idea is impossible. It can't be done. And most analysts, most geopolitical analysts that have been studying this for years and actually hoped and prayed that the two-state solution could be made possible, most of them are coming around and saying, and this is not just like recently, but over the last number of years, they're saying that the illegal settlement building program that Israel has pushed has effectively achieved the goal of the Likud party platform. It has made a two-state solution impossible. So, one-state solution. Can that be done? Well, the quick answer is no, not in my opinion. The one-state solution is probably never going to happen because in a one-state scenario, all of the lands that make up the Palestinian territories, all of the lands that make up Israel, they would have to become one homogeneous single state. Each Palestinian and each Israeli would share citizenship in the same country. They would have equal civic rights. They would have equal voting rights, majority rules. The government could not be a Jewish state. It would have to be a secular state. So you'd have to have a government that is a blend of the Palestinian and Israeli people. Sounds like a good idea. It sounds wonderful, but it probably will never happen. You could persuade Palestinians to go along with it, but the Zionists in Israel, which make up the overwhelming majority of the population, they do not want to share society with Arabs. They want an ethno-supremacist state that is exclusively Jewish, and not Jewish just because of Judaism, the religion, because most of the Zionists are actually atheists. You certainly have got religious Zionists. They're crazies. They're the ones out there saying, killing people, killing men and women, and taking people's homes because they believe God told them that's okay. But whether they are atheist or not, these people do not want the Palestinians to have an equal say in government. They don't want to have to live next door to an Arab. Racism is a huge problem in Israel. Some people in the United States, we've got Antifa and BLM out there setting things on fire and protesting about racism. They have no idea what racism is compared to what happens to the Palestinian people. It's not an exaggeration to say that there is a serious hatred of Arabs by a large segment of the Jewish population in Israel. Zionism has always pushed the ideology of Jewish supremacy, the idea that Jews alone make up a holy, chosen race that is preferred above all other people by God. And with that chosen status, that gives them rights and privileges that other people cannot have inside of a Jewish state. I'm not making this up. This is supported by poll after poll after poll of the Israeli citizens themselves, which I have done videos on and shared the polling data. Jewish politicians in Israel's parliament, which is called the Knesset, they've made it clear that they will never share power in a single state with Palestinians. So could the international community come along and force the two sides to make peace and compromise on a one-state solution? Set aside your settlements, set aside your ideas that you're chosen, set aside all of the hate and the animosity that's built up? Well, anything's possible. We've got to keep the door open, but history compels us to have serious doubts about that. So that means if the one state and the traditional two-state idea isn't realistic, what we have to do is take a novel approach to the conflict. And so there is a growing interest in a variation on this one state, two state idea, where you take you have a reality check, you look at the reality of the situation, and you take from the two different proposals the best elements, blend them together, and come up with something kind of new. Now, I'm going to explain some of this to you, but you're going to recognize some holes in it immediately, and there are holes in it. But when when enough people put their heads together and work on this, some of these things can be resolved. As it is right now, there are so many Palestinians in the land. Jews can't drive them out. They're trying. Clearly, you can see in Gaza that they're trying to push them down into Egypt. But the only way to do that is through mass genocide, ethnic cleansing. It's not going to happen. I mean, they'll make an effort, but you cross a certain point, and it's going to be war from other parties getting involved. So, and you're not going to be able to ethnically cleanse all of the West Bank either. You've got so many Jewish settlers that are sprinkled into the Palestinian territories, you're never going to uproot them. One of the things that they proposed back in the 90s when they were talking about the Oslo Accords was the idea of land swaps, where the two sides, recognizing there's a lot of Jews living in the West Bank, the idea was the territories, the settlements would be turned over to the Palestinians in exchange for the Palestinians giving up land from somewhere else. Now, that was a viable, not a great idea, but it was viable back in the 90s. But we've had several decades pass, and the ramping up of the settlement program and the flooding, absolute flooding of Jewish settlements into the West Bank, there's no more land for the Palestinians to trade for the settlements. They just don't control enough land anymore to be able to swap for the settlements. So again, the problem is the settlement program has made options that used to be viable paths to peace, they've eliminated that because they don't want the Palestinians to have a state. So here's the idea, the alternative. It's the idea of a two-state confederation. What you do is you start with the 1967 Green Line boundaries. That's where you had, prior to the 1967 war, Palestinians controlled a lot more territory than they do now. So you go back to the Green Line, what the Palestinians had prior to the 1967 Six-Day War. Start there. That area will become a Palestinian state, full statehood, full autonomy. The rest of the territory will remain an Israeli state. So you do have two states, but it's not the traditional two-state solution. You let the Jews stay in the settlements where they are. Most of them. You could have some modification. But you're never going to get them to leave voluntarily, and Israel does not have the capacity, the military capacity to go in, or the willpower to go in and wage war on its own people, to have a civil war that'll slaughter hundreds of thousands of its own citizens. It's not going to happen. So if you can't uproot them, but you can't let them stay and muck things up in a Palestinian state, what you do is you let the settlers stay where they are. They can move around just like if they were Palestinian, but their political status would be Israeli. They would not enjoy Palestinian rights. So in effect, it'd be like Israeli citizens if they lived in a foreign country, say in Paris, if they moved to Paris. There's no restrictions on Jews living in Paris. They can go around, they can go to shops, they can engage in business with certain status. I don't know what you would call the green card status in Paris, but something like that. But they retain their voting rights and everything. in Israel. They could vote in Israeli elections. Now, that's one thing. You solve the settler problem by letting them stay there, but not letting them have any power. And you go back and add the territory that was taken in 1967 to expand the territory. But here's the other thing. You say, oh, well, that's one-sided. That only helps the Jews. Well, it's true. But the other component is you allow the right of return of Palestinian refugees. They can return. They can return, and there's millions of them. They can return to the lands of the Palestinian state and live there. They would have full citizenship. Or, like the Jews live in settlements in Palestine, you can have Palestinian settlements or buildings, or just live among the Jews in Israel. You would have to have, each side would have to have a controlled quota system. I'm not saying unlimited control. You'd lock it in. It's not like you could continue to build settlements in Israel, in Palestine. You couldn't. That's locked in. No more growth. But you would, the deal would be fine. You have 700,000 of your people in Palestine. Okay, we get to have 700,000 of our people in Israel. They wouldn't be able to vote in Israeli elections. They wouldn't be able to change the status of Israel as a ethno Jewish supremacist state. It could still be Jewish only state, just like there's some Islamic countries where it's a Muslim state. Fine. Now, under the current idea of a one state solution, Jews do not want to allow Palestinian refugees to have this right of return for two reasons. One is they took possession of a lot of homes they'd have to turn back over. That's one thing. But a huge influx of refugees would give Arabs a demographic majority, and that would threaten in a democratic system, democratic one state system. They would outvote the Jewish demographic, and you could not have a Jewish only government. So that doesn't work. That's one reason they don't want the Palestinian refugees to come back in a one-state solution. They also don't want them to come back in either a two-state solution or whatever, because it creates, again, a demographic majority in the region. And currently that would interfere with their settlement building. So a confederation plan allows the Palestinian refugees to return, but the influx would not overturn Jewish control in the Israeli government. So it neutralizes that concern. You know, if one of the major impediments to the Jews agreeing to a right of return is that it's going to screw with the political power of the two demographics, then fine, lock it in. But like I said, it also locks in settlements. It prohibits future expansion. There would probably have to be land swaps where, because there are so many settlements taking up so much territory, got to do the land swaps, have to let Israel, if they want to retain that, they have to give up land around the perimeter of either Gaza or the West Bank to the Palestinians in exchange for the right to keep their people in those settlements. And there's a lot of land that Israel controls that they don't have settlers on. And another problem that I see with this is that a lot of the settlements, it's on the choice land. They build it up on hilltops. There would have to be a complete restructuring of the flow of water, electricity, all kinds of things where it benefits the Israelis who are living there at the expense of the Palestinians. That would have to end. That would have to be corrected. And like I said, if Jews know that while they're allowed to move into Palestinian-owned homes, but they can't create new Jewish settlements, this motivation to keep pushing like the Likud party platform's talking about, trying to keep pushing Jews into the West Bank, it negates that. There's no motivation. It doesn't achieve anything. Because if you have immigration or limited residency controls in place, it reduces friction dramatically. I'm not saying uncontrolled, as many Jews that want to go into the West Bank and as many Muslim Arabs as want to go into Israel. No, no, no. You'd have to maintain uh, control of the population. It's kind of like two boys who share a bedroom. They're always fighting over who gets the top bunk, who gets to use the nightstand, who gets this drawer or that drawer, who gets to use the TV. So the solution to that is you pull the two bunk beds apart, put one bed on one side of the room, put another bed on the other side of the room, give each boy a nightstand, each boy a TV, run a curtain down the middle of the room so that each boy is in charge of his side of the room. There's going to continue in the immediate uh, period of time when that's implemented. There's going to continue to be friction and fighting at first, but by giving each side autonomy over his piece of the room, they're going to gradually learn to coexist. Neither one is going to be 100% satisfied with the division. Both sides are going to want the whole room to themselves. But that's the gist, that's the idea of a confederation plan. It takes the best elements of these two plans, the one state and the two state ideas, accepts the reality of the situation, takes into account the settlement program. And then when you get into the issue of the capital, both sides want Jerusalem as their capital. Currently, East Jerusalem is Palestinian territory. West Jerusalem was taken by Israel in uh, years ago. So fine, Israel keeps west side, Palestine keeps the east. Both sides can use Jerusalem as their capitals. Neither side's going to be happy. Both sides would love for it to be a single undivided capital, but that's just not going to happen. And there's other issues that would have to be resolved, like final control over holy sites that both sides claim. You've got the Al-Aqsa Mosque up there, but Jews claim that that's the site of the ancient Temple Mount, even though archaeology does not bear that out. So they're going to fight over that. So you do have some issues that are still going to have to be resolved. There are already systems in place that are somewhat decent to deal with this, such as the security and the control over the the Temple Mount Al-Aqsa Mosque area up in the old city. But the systems have broken down because the Israelis have been able to act with impunity. They can just have their security forces come in, armed security forces, throw in all of their stun grenades and tear gas, drive the Palestinian Muslim worshippers out, and then have the Jewish people come in and do their stuff. That's what's been happening, and is very provocative. But the Palestinians can't fight that off because they're not armed. In this confederation situation, Palestinians would have control of their own security. They would have their own armed forces, and Israel could not do this because they would get shot. And vice versa. You can't do this. There's a video that a friend of mine sent me a couple of days ago of she and I visited the the name of Al Haram, the Abraham Mosque in Al Khalil, which is in Hebron. Al Haram Ibrahim, something like that. I don't remember the Arabic name for it. It's where Abraham is buried. And it is controlled, it's Palestinian territory. And they control it. But the Jewish settlers went in and attacked and drove the Palestinians out this week. And they went inside of it, and it's a sacred place. It's quiet inside, a lot of reverence. It's huge, huge building inside, huge mosque, very beautiful, well cared for. And they take it seriously. You don't go into the mosque. In fact, somebody that was in the party that I was with when we went, he wasn't allowed to go in because he had shorts on. So he had to wear a sarong before he was allowed to go in, because they don't put up with disrespect. And yet the Jews went in there, Jewish settlers went in this week and brought in all kinds of equipment, loudspeakers. Uh, they brought in synthesizers, music equipment, microphones, did some karaoke in there, dancing, tons of them in there inside the mosque, singing about how they're going to throw all of the Arabs out, that this just an absolutely indefensible behavior. That would not happen if Palestine has a state of its own and its own security apparatus. And maybe they could come to some agreement on when there are sites where both major religions and Christians as well share some of the same interests. You know, Abraham is the father of many nations. From him came Ishmael and eventually the Islamic religion. Through him came the Christian and religion and Judaism. So if there's a holy place, there could probably be an agreement on how to permit multiple faiths to worship in a way that the various parties can agree on. I think that can be achieved, but not if you've got these radical settlers who are like, we're just going to do it our way and profane the other people's beliefs. These are the people, you can see videos on Twitter or YouTube right now. These people are religious supremacists. They literally, there are a lot of Christians in the Holy Land, Palestinian Christians, and they spit on them. They spit on them as they walk by. So anyway, there's a lot of things that this confederation plan would have to deal with, have to be explored and developed. And obviously what I'm talking about is it would take a lot of work. But to me, it seems that the traditional concept of a two-state solution has problems that it's dead. It can't be done. And the one-state solution, I just don't see these people ever coming around. So I'm just exploring ideas with you, sharing some thoughts of mine. If you've appreciated this discussion, I'd love for you to buy me a coffee. buymeacoffee.com/blackstoneintel. The moderate people, we need to be the ones to have a bigger say in what's going on. Because if we leave it up to the extremists on either side of the debate, of the conflict, it's only going to just keep kicking the can down the road. There's just going to continue to be bloodshed and massacres. There will continue to be terrorism. The solution to this is not getting rid of Hamas. That's not the solution, because it keeps the problem in place. The problem is the occupation. The problem is you've got as many people, Palestinians, as many people there as there are Jews, who don't have basic human rights. It is untenable. It cannot persist and there be peace. It's not possible. So all of the Zionists and the Zionist sympathizers who are pushing this idea that just get rid of Hamas and that takes care of the problem, you're morons. You have no idea what you're talking about. You're delusional. For there to be peace, you have to get rid of the underlying problems that are creating the conflict. Such gross inequality is not going to fix the problem. Ignoring it's not going to fix it. But neither side wants to have this discussion. Well, both sides do, but they're in the minorities. There's, in fact, let me show you this. I've got this up on Twitter. There's a member of the Israeli parliament, an actual Israeli Knesset member, who was just ordered by the Knesset's ethics committee to shut up for 2 months. They have ordered, she's not allowed to speak in parliament. She's not allowed to express her opinions. And you know what her crime is? She had the audacity to say that mass murdering of Gazan children is not the solution. And so they found her guilty and told her she's not allowed to speak. Let me play this clip for you here. Her speaking. Hopefully you can hear it. If you can't hear it, let me know.
I left the Knesset 2 hours ago, and I won't be for 2 months able to express my feelings, my opinions in the plenary or in the committees, because the ethics committee in the Knesset decided to prevent me. In the only democracy in the Middle East, a parliamentarian who is representing almost 20% of the citizens of Israel is not allowed to speak out. And why is that? Because I raised questions about the war, because I am against, first of all, the war and hurting civilians from both sides. If you remember well, 2 weeks ago, when I protested and spoke about the children from 2 sides of the borders, here in Israel and in Gaza, I was told in that same parliament that there is no equality, there is no symmetry between the children, and the children of Gaza brought it on themselves. So it looks like this ethics committee decided that either I speak exactly what they want me to speak, either I will be silenced. The voice, anti-war voice, is going to be silenced now for 2 months. I promise you. My values, my opinions will be heard. Nobody can silence me, and I will keep and continue to struggle for peace.
Okay. Isn't that outrageous? Unbelievable. Well, it's totally believable for anyone familiar with the attitude of Zionists. Absolute fascists. Let me see. Speaking of fascists, let me see if I can scroll through and find. I posted something. Oh yeah. So one of the most radical members of the Israeli government is this guy here. Let me see if I can get his picture up. Smotrich. What a name. Bezalel Smotrich. He is the finance minister in Netanyahu's administration. Very, very extreme. And he today, he's slamming his own war cabinet. He's the finance minister, but he's also in charge of the settlement program in the West Bank. He's slamming his own war cabinet because they're negotiating a hostage release with Hamas. And he doesn't like that. He says hostage negotiations with Sinwar from Hamas is the wrong thing to do, because this guy and the people like him, he wants for his own citizens to be held as prisoners or as hostages because it's better propaganda. This is also the guy who got in trouble. Well, he didn't get in trouble. But back in March, this is the finance. This would be kind of like the Treasury Secretary of the United States. He said that there is a West Bank town where he wanted everybody to be eliminated, wipe them out. He called for genocide of all of the people in a West Bank town. I had posted somewhere another thing with him where he was. Yeah, here he is. Finance Minister Smotrich. He said, "My voters don't care if I'm a homophobe or fascist. My word is my bond." And a quote from him is, "I may be a far right person, a homophobe, a racist, a fascist, but my word is my bond." He's proud of it. This is from January. So he's in charge of the annexation efforts in the West Bank. Let's see here. Oh yeah, here's pictures from the. Oh, let me look here. That's too big. Let me see if I can make the. I don't know how to show my screen here. Maybe I can. Trying to make this picture where we can see it better. This was the certificate we got for planting the olive trees in Palestine. And you guys made it happen. These are some of the people that received the olive trees. You can see they've got a sign that says "Thank you, Team Blackstone." They were able to take that and plant the olive trees. I'm trying to get in touch with the director that oversaw it to see if she knows if any of the trees that we planted have been cut down again. This was me doing some picking olives with farmers when I was over there. But anyway, we got a lot of work to do. Got a lot of work to do. This is not an issue that gets resolved overnight. But there's a lot of progress being made on it may not look like it, but Israel went too damned far this time. And there is a surge in opposition to the Israeli occupation in a way that I have not seen since the 90s. So anyway, progress is being made, little steps at a time. In the meantime, we have to keep demanding. Anytime you see a hashtag about ceasefire now, retweet it, repost it, post your own. We have to have a ceasefire right now, because every day that passes by, more innocent people are killed, more orphans are created, and more people who are losing family members, who are more likely to take up arms themselves if the opportunity ever comes up. If you killed my kids, there is nothing that would stop me from coming back after Israel. I don't mean going after civilians, but I'd do what I could to fight back. They are breeding a generation of resistance fighters who are going to continue going at it with Israel. So just suck it up, deal with the reality of the situation. But the problem is, Israel, the majority of the people are as brainwashed as the Hamas extremists who are of the attitude that they cannot negotiate with Israel. There has to be an eradication of the entire Israeli state. That's not realistic. It's not going to happen. It's ideology that may sound good to some people, but it's never going to happen. It's just not. So you deal with the reality and you get the adults to sit down together, the people who can be moderate in their thinking and work through solutions. That's what we need. We need for the extremists out there to be kept on the fringes. But unfortunately, you've got here in the United States, even the US State Department, they're going full force in support of the ongoing massacre. And they know darn well you're not going to get rid of Hamas. You may be able to push, get them on the run. You may be able to force, kill most of the leadership and get the rest of them, in exile somewhere. But you don't get rid of Hamas. Something else will take its place. If the conditions remain in a way where the people are living in a state of constant terror, someone else will just come in and take the place of Hamas. So you have to get to the root cause. Stop trying to just treat the symptoms and get to the core of the problem. Go to the source. And you cannot do that. You cannot negotiate with the current regime in Israel. A lot of Israelis have been brainwashed. But the reassuring thing is that so many Jews outside of Israel, they feel as strongly about this as anybody else. Just today, Jewish Voice for Peace, which is a group that I'm a member of, a dues-paying member of Jewish Voice for Peace, their San Francisco chapter, their I don't know, it's called San Francisco or Bay, the Bay, California chapter out there. They went out there and shut down traffic on the Bay Bridge, and so you've got to call attention to the need for a ceasefire, trying to get Biden's attention. There's all kinds of civil disobedience going on that Jews are leading the way. And so I'm proud of that. I'm glad to see that. The rising generation is asking questions that have not been asked, that I have seen since the 1990s, for example. I know I'll be accused here of, just like everybody who brings this up gets accused of being a terrorist sympathizer or whatever, but the Gen Z, a lot of them are talking on TikTok about the writings of Osama bin Laden before 9/11 and why there was the explanation he gave for why the jihad was declared against America. And what he wrote is, you are enabling the butchery of the Palestinian people by Israel. If it were not for you propping them up, giving them money, giving them weapons, and acting as their bodyguard, they could not do this. Either the Palestinians themselves would be able to fight it off, or them with a combination of Arab states. But as long as the United States is there enabling this, so his position was, we're gonna take action. We're gonna attack your people. See how you like it. Now, I'm not saying I support attacking civilians. You know, I have spoken out against Hamas attacks on civilians. And I have been consistent in that since the second intifada of the early 2000s. I've never wavered in that. And I certainly don't support Osama bin Laden's jihad on American civilians. I don't support that either. But you have to understand the context in which violent acts take place, because if you don't learn if you don't try and empathize and look at the enemy and see why are they doing this, what is motivating them, and be introspective and say, and if it turns out that they're dead wrong, that you're not doing anything wrong, fine, done, move forward. You don't have to change. But if you don't at least stop and listen and ask yourself why, is there any merit to what that side is saying? You can look at yourself and say, you know what? If I was Palestinian or if I was a Muslim looking at this and jihad was an option, I can see how I would be persuaded uh, to follow that path. So, is there anything that my government is doing that is oppressive or enabling in a bad way that's contrary to the values that we as a society claim to have? Oh, yeah, we actually are doing some really atrocious stuff over there. So, while I don't agree with the attacks on Americans, there is a valid point being made here. And the fact that there are serious threats against my people because my country is doing bad things, it behooves me as a responsible citizen to petition my government to change the behaviors that are making my people less safe. I brought that up when I was running the largest discussion group in the United States after 9/11, the biggest one on the internet at the time, doing heavy research into the Al-Qaeda network and trying to figure out what can we do to stop a future attack. Along the way, part of it was looking at the motivations of the enemy. And when I was making the point to people back then that I'm making now, you you camel humping terrorist, oh, the hate that I got. The faux outrage, the crocodile tears from the people. I had I had this I had this military chaplain, Marine chaplain, Reverend Jim Sutter, who reported me 3 times to the FBI saying I was a terrorist collaborator because I was opposing the entry of the upcoming Iraq war. Because only a terrorist lover would oppose going in to mass murder Iraqis, right? Oh, I got a lot of hate over that. And nothing has changed. Here we are. These Gen Zers, they're getting attacked by members of Congress in social media. They're getting attacked by influencers like the jackass Ben Shapiro, who I would love to stand face to face with Ben Shapiro and debate him on the occupation. I would wipe the floor with him because he's all emotion. I'm not some freshman, in some liberal college that can be walked over. A coward won't even debate Norman Finkelstein. He's all fluff. He talks tough. But a person can talk tough, but if the position that you're defending is immoral, you don't stand. It's going to break down. Your arguments break down, and he has no real arguments. So you set up straw men. Oh, well, if you're pro-Palestine, that means you support what Hamas did to civilians on October 7th. Can't debate me on the merits of my argument, which is the occupation is the problem. What Hamas did is reprehensible, but understanding the context in which it happened, what inspired this matters. And what has, while I grieve for the people that were killed on the 7th, and I certainly want the hostages released. I don't agree with that whatsoever. Couple hundred hostages. I'll be very quick to point out that Thousands of Palestinian civilians have been snatched off the street in broad daylight and ripped out of their beds at night, kidnapped by the IDF, thrown into prisons, and held in those gulags. The children are beaten, they're put in stress positions, they're denied food, and they've been stuck there for years. And you want my empathy, my sympathy for your hostages, but you're unwilling to acknowledge my concerns about what your side has done? You moral cowards. Anyway, I've spent decades on this issue. Oh, the Zionists, they're good at propaganda. Or at least they think they are. Boy, has the IDF been stunningly stupid this week with stuff they've been posting. Oh my gosh, the stuff they post and then have to delete when they realize they read the comments under their post and realize, oh crap, we screwed that one up. That one didn't work. Let's get rid of that. Today, Benjamin Netanyahu grudgingly acknowledged, you know what? We don't have any evidence that hostages were being held at Al Shifa Hospital. But maybe they were. Wait a second. You told us you had irrefutable evidence, and the U.S. government was saying, oh, yeah, we have evidence of it. We have proof. Our intelligence services say so. But now we're hearing, oh, that's right, there wasn't any. But we found a terrorist calendar. It has horrifying days of the week written on the calendar. We found some rifles here. They're rusted. The bullets are rusted, but trust us, we didn't just bring them in. Surely this means this was a command headquarters for Hamas. And that justifies us brutalizing the people that were here by the thousands, most of them suffering from wounds that we had previously inflicted on them. Israel cannot win this debate in a fair fight. So that's why they fight dirty. That's why they make up the lies. That's why they push the 40 beheaded babies kind of crap. That's why they only want the discussion to start at October 7th. That's why they want you to believe that their mass murder of over 10,000 civilians is really about getting Hamas, which it's not. Why are they not showing us tons of pictures, videos of all? And I saw a video of this today, a compilation of one person after another in the Israeli government, one clip after another of them calling not Hamas, but the Palestinian people of Gaza human animals. Worse than animals, some of them. I always wondered, what was it like in the Weimar Republic? What were conditions like that allowed the rise of such hatred of the Jews? And I see that now. Most of the Jews were totally innocent of anything. It started out, there were concerns over they had witnessed the Bolshevik Revolution, Jewish-led Bolshevik Revolution that overthrew Russia and the establishment of the Soviet Union. And there was a thriving communist party made up primarily of Jews, German Jews, that was trying to take control of the German government. So there was concern there. But then, just like you can say, well, there's concern over Hamas, and statements that they've made about trying to go after all of the Jews. But then they expanded it. Germany expanded it to where it was just wholesale slaughter. Well, first it was attempts at deportation, but then they just turned to wholesale slaughter of innocent, average Jewish people. The pogroms, the banning of Jewish attorneys, the banning of bankers, the banning of artisans. You couldn't even produce art as a Jew in Germany at a certain point. Like, how did the people go from one step to another, to another, to another, to where they are just going after all of the Jews? Well, we're watching a similar kind of mindset happening now, where you say, all right, it's Hamas. But they're not going after Hamas. They're committing mass murder of the average people. What was done to the Jews was heinous during World War II. How can anyone say what was done to them was bad, but what is being done to the Palestinians is okay? If you had been alive back then, living in Germany and German culture, maybe you would think this is not right and you'd keep your mouth shut because you're afraid to speak out. That's how it is in Israel. I mean, I just showed you that clip of the member of the Knesset who's been shut up. They're going after people, peace activists. Israeli Jews are being fired. They're being persecuted for saying, I don't support what my government is doing. So are we seeing today a lurch toward fascism? I just showed you the post there of the finance minister Smotrich admitting, yeah, I'm a fascist. What of it? We are seeing a very dangerous atmosphere developing over there. These people have nukes. They have nuclear weapons. You really want someone like Smotrich, Eilert Shekhed, Benny Gantz, certainly not Netanyahu. You want any of these people controlling nuclear weapons when they are of the mindset that they are a superior human species than other people that need to be eradicated? It's horrifying. The extremist belief system that led to the wholly unjust persecution of the Jews is being repeated today, except it's being committed by the Jews in Israel. It's very perplexing that the people who, of any people on earth, who ought to know how heinous this kind of behavior is, they're the ones doing it. Thank God there are so many Jews around the world who are speaking out against it. And let me reiterate, and I've been telling people this on Twitter today, that go and sometimes they'll put up like some kind of, big nosed Jew meme. You know those memes with the Jews with the greedy Jew meme. And I tell them, I hide the post. I send a message to the person saying, I don't appreciate it. I don't agree with it. Keep that garbage, that bigotry off of my feed. And then I block them. I don't want that crap. And I sure don't want to see it from any of my supporters here on YouTube. If you think I agree with that kind of crap, man, you do not know me. Yeah, the greedy merchant stuff. Yeah, don't slip into that garbage, guys. Don't get radicalized by that stuff. You always become ineffective in fighting for the rights of the Palestinians when you align yourself with that kind of trash. All it does is it provokes people. It turns people off. And it does great harm to our side because we are people like me, we become guilty by association. That's why I try and cut the people out. I don't want the association with them. I don't want my name or my brand associated with that kind of stuff. So anyway, um, yes, I see here in the chat someone got me 3 coffees. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. In fact, let me peek here. Maybe I can see. I should thank anyone that has contributed here. Let me see if I can log in real quick. All right. I will, the initials AR, who made a donation about 26 minutes ago. Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Very much so. Remember, guys, to go to blackstoneintel.substack.com if you want to sign up for my newsletter. There's a free option, and there's also a paid option. I actually haven't posted anything to the paid option yet because I wanted to get some people signed up first. I actually have over 9,000 people signed up for a previous newsletter. I just imported that mailing list, so I'm going to start putting stuff out there as well. Some of the content that I share in video form, I'm going to turn into transcripts or newsletter form and send that out. That way you can study it and learn some of it that way. All right. I could take maybe 1 or 2 quick questions here before I go, and then I'm going to run. Oh my goodness, it's already been an hour and 45 minutes. My goal had been to get on for 30 minutes. I swear I can't shut up. I told Mike Adams before the interview started the other day, I said, listen, Mike, I don't know how long your show is, but once you ask me a question, be ready to jump in and shut me up, because if you don't, I will take control and never shut up again. That's my biggest that's my hardest thing, is to stop talking. All right, questions. Break and Chain, are you still in touch with Adam Green? I haven't talked to Adam Green in 4 or 5 years, 3 years, 4 years. I don't know, something like that. And even back then, it was extremely limited. It was only a couple of times that he and I talked outside of the one interview we did together. Oh, Hamza just bought me a coffee. Hamza. Thank you, Hamza. I appreciate it. All right, I've had 2 people donate tonight. Thank you. And I think that there are a couple people who mentioned PayPal that may have donated on PayPal. Thank you for that. Eventually, I'll get around to thanking each of you that make donations with a personal message. Perry says, Jake, you hold respect in the community, but I can't vet you. You're pleasant, seem amazing, but no one can know the truth unless you're genuine. I'm not convinced. Sorry. Stick around. People who have been following me for years will probably all tell you the same thing, which is I am saying the same stuff today that I have said for year after year after year after year. I modify positions when I realize that I've made an error in judgment, or I modify my position if I get new information that changes my perspective. I'm not afraid to change my mind on things, but the core, the core positions have never changed because I work from a principle. I start with a principle that undergirds everything else, and I move from there. So, for example, do I condemn what Hamas has done to civilians? I don't even have to ask. The answer is yes, because I start from the position, from the principle that violence against civilians, against innocent people, is wrong. So I don't have to wait for each individual. Well, do you condemn it in that this side killed civilians over here? What about this side against these civilians? What about this side against these civilians? I don't care what the conflict is. You don't kill innocent men, women, and children. So I start with the principle and I work from there. And that's why I rarely have to change my position on things. Perry asks, you disappeared for a while. What's your background? My background is um, how far back? I've lived overseas. I've done work overseas. I lived in Thailand for a few years in my 20s, did work over there. People think that I was in the CIA. I wasn't. I did live in a UN security compound, and did a lot of stuff and got myself into some hairy situations over there, doing humanitarian work. Um, but it makes people think that you know there's more to it than that. I have always been interested in the intelligence community. I've always been interested in intelligence operations. So that's always been an interest of mine. And geopolitics has been one of my favorite things since I was a teenager. I've loved it. I started with intense interest in domestic politics when I was a kid. As a 14-year-old, I organized uh, uh, a youth for George H.W. Bush campaign. Back then, I didn't understand, I was 14 years old, but I got involved in politics at a young age and I stayed active. I was a state campaign manager for the presidential campaign of Steve Forbes in 2000. I was a writer for the Ron Paul campaign in 2008, 2012. I've met many presidential candidates. I've met many U.S. senators. I've spent time as a campaign manager for state candidates, uh, members of the state house and Senate. I was very involved in politics. Thought that one day I wanted to go into politics, but my exposure to it showed me this is so dirty. I don't want to. And besides, the real power is not in the hands of the politicians. So I continued writing about politics, but I didn't get in it. But in the mid 90s, I really got into writing about the Middle East. And I stayed with that. It became a making money on the side as a writer. But as far as my vocation, I was an investigator in a couple different fields. Um, Mental health field, group homes for adults with mental retardation and other developmental disabilities. I did investigative work there. I managed some group homes. I was the director of the largest um, food bank, nonprofit humanitarian organization in Northwest North Carolina. We did millions of dollars a year in free medicine for the indigent. We fed thousands of people a month. Um, but then I ended up working because of my interest in investigation. In fact, my ring here is, some of you may recognize it. Oh, let me get it in front of the camera. That's the Magnum PI ring. That's what Magnum PI and his buddies wore. Uh, I used to want to become a private investigator, but instead of that, I went to work for a Fortune 100 bank as a criminal financial crimes investigator. And so I learned the skills of doing research and investigation and how to put things together. And then I went out on my own at a certain point. I decided, you know what, I want to work for myself. I don't like working for a big corporation, especially one that engages in practices that I have uh, moral aversion to. And so I started doing my own work. I started my YouTube channel in 2013, I think it was. And I've had a few different channels. They've been, some of them have been deleted over time. I have to keep starting over. But since then, I started doing video reports, taking my interests, and it grew. And I developed contacts, many of them political contacts that I had had over the years from my previous political work, and was getting fed information. I thought, you know what, I'm going to use this to branch out. And I started getting in touch with um, people in the political sectors and other governments, um, people around the world involved in government work, humanitarian work, journalists around the world, and I started developing a network uh, of contacts. And some of them I contact frequently. I mean, there's good people and there's bad people in it. I have criminal contacts, criminals who are willing to share information with me on stuff that they do. Uh, I have got members of foreign governments who give me information. I have people here in the FBI uh, that give me information. I had a really good CIA contact, and my viewers know he was killed a couple of years back, murdered locally. He was chopped up, and they shot him. He was chopped up, and they left his bones in a bag that was found by a girl who was walking her dog in the woods. So my background is in, all kind of all over the place, but most of it has been in developing a network of contacts that I use when big events happen. I can reach out to them and get information. I have contacts in Gaza. I have contacts in the West Bank. When it comes to this stuff, I've got contacts who are very wealthy. I have contacts who have very menial jobs. Like during the Las Vegas investigation, I had viewers who were in just regular jobs who had access to information that they sent me, like Stephen Paddock's credit card receipts, or not receipts, but his credit card statements. I got rental car receipts was sent to me from when he had rented a car just before the massacre. So people send me stuff, and I piece that together, and I make reports based on that. And then sometimes a lot of the time, I'm just doing like I'm doing tonight, where I just take things I've learned and my thoughts, and I share that information that's not based on any particular like intelligence source. So that's kind of my background. Uh, Malia White says, "Remember what they did to that Ohio congressman? Yeah, Jim Trafficant. His family had connections to mobsters, but he had a lot of information. He had a lot of information. He spoke out against the Israeli lobby, and they got him put in prison. They went after him hardcore. One of my contacts is Cynthia McKinney, the former congresswoman, and she's an outspoken critic um, of the abuse of the Palestinians. She participated in trying to get humanitarian goods to Gaza years ago, and they went after her. She and I were going to go to. She invited me to go with her to China a few years ago to go out check out the Uyghur camps and stuff like that, and it didn't pan out because one of my kids ended up setting his wedding date for the middle of the trip, so I lost my $500 deposit on that, which I wasn't crazy about, but um, anyway. So yeah, yeah. Ron Blevins. Traffic. He exposed the fact that all congressmen must sign a letter of loyalty to Israel. Anyway, I mean, I don't agree with Cynthia's domestic politics. I never did. I work with people I don't agree with on a host of things. I talk to people that I disagree with. I'll talk to anyone. It does. I learn so much by talking to people I don't agree with. I think it helps me to have a more rounded worldview, a better perspective when I consider what I would be so narcissistic to think that I know it all. I don't. So I talk to other people. Sometimes I find that I don't value their opinions whatsoever. Frequently, especially in social media. But I'll hear them out. But then again, there's a lot of people who I don't agree with on a lot of things. But there are areas where we overlap, and I value the relationship. I value the connections. Hey, hey. Wow, a couple more people. Coral, Alexander, and someone. Thank you guys. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. It's generous of you. I'll send you a little note on Buy Me a Coffee to say thanks. Um, Cali girl, Ben Laden's letter that was removed. If anyone ever wants to send me something, you can send it to Jake at blackstoneintel.com. Um, I get flooded with messages, so I don't usually respond to a lot of them. I just don't have the enough time between all of the social media stuff and all that. But sometimes. And Adrian says, "I'm sending you a little money via PayPal." Woohoo! Thank you. I I don't. Other people do YouTube videos and they get ad revenue. They get a share of the ad revenue. They can get super chats. It's very time consuming. Very time consuming. Like before you set up a live stream, there's so much that you have to do to get ready for it. I'm just getting the all the stuff in place, and then after it's over, responding to comments and everything. I easily spend just on an average live stream. I easily spend 3 hours working on it. So yeah, if people value the information, I'm grateful that people want to help compensate. I don't make a living off this, that's for sure. But having a little help uh, makes it gives motivation. I mean, think of it. If there's wouldn't you be more motivated to do something if you were getting a little income from it? Sure, you would. Doesn't make you a bad person. Doesn't make you greedy. It's just how it is. If you're looking for, if you're Iyad, my Cash App is $ Blackstone Intel. And that will be, once this live stream is over, I believe it's going to be down in the notes in the video description. Um, Someone was asking about PayPal. It's paypal.me/Blackstone Intel. Venmo, I don't think I have. Well, I do have Venmo, but I use it for a different business, and I don't want to mix the two. And if anyone wants to donate with Bitcoin, I've got Bitcoin, Litecoin, and Ethereum wallets in the description. But anyway, yeah, Ron Paul never sold out, but his son Rand sure did. Went to Israel with his son and kissed the wall. Yeah, yeah, Rand. I voted for him in one of the presidential primaries um, years ago. I think it was the back in 2015 in the lead up to 2015, 2000, early 2016. But yeah, after 2016, he started going downhill on some stuff. I mean, on the balance, he's probably still better than most of the U.S. senators. When you got people like Mitch McConnell and others in there, yeah, these people are not. They're not on our side. They are not on the side of. They'll tell you that they're slick. They're well rehearsed. They will tell you things that you want to hear, but they have no intention of doing it. They don't care. You're not the one giving them power. The special interests are. You're not the one financing their campaigns. It's the super PACs. You're not the one who, at the end of your congressional career, or at the end of their congressional career, you're not the one that's going to give them a multi-million-dollar job sitting on the board of directors or on some advisory board for the corporation that they've been giving corporate welfare to during their congressional term. You're not the one. Boeing, Raytheon, Northrop Grumman, the war industry, ExxonMobil, the oil cartels, and big tech and big media. We don't control our Congress anymore. We haven't for a long time, but I remember a time when people still had influence, but there's barely any influence anymore. We have no influence over the U.S. Senate. We still have some influence over the U.S. House. It's easier to depose a sitting member of the House than it is a senator. But even that's very difficult because congressional races are now millions of dollars. Yeah, yeah, a multi-million-dollar book deal for a crap book no one buys. They buy it themselves. That's what they do. They'll buy their own books up at wholesale prices so that it looks like they're getting a lot of sales, and they'll end up on the New York Times bestseller list so they can say, I'm a New York Times bestseller. I bought all my own books. Anyway, well, he can ask, if Israel attacks Iran directly, what would be the outcome? Well, uh, Iran would. It depends on what the attack was. If it's like an invasion, if they're trying to topple the government, then it'd be all out war. Um, they both have virtually no navy. Uh, Iran has a far superior ground force, and they have a depth that they can pull from for infantry, because you've got 77 million people in Iran. You've got around 9 million Israelis. So, and Iran has got twice the size of the army, the standing army, as Israel. And they can just keep replacing their soldiers, but that's not the kind of war that there would be, because you can't get all of those people from Iran. You can't move them through um, the intervening the couple thousand kilometers without getting hit along the way, and Israel has a superior air force. So they would be able to degrade the Iranian military as it's trying to move over. What there would have to be is um, a huge response to divert uh, Israel. You'd have to have Syria, you'd have to have Iraq, you'd have to have Lebanon, the Hezbollah, you'd have to have Egypt, you'd have to have Jordan, you'd have to have this huge response to overwhelm Israel. Iran has far superior ballistic missile capability. But the thing is, if it was a smaller scale event, if it started out smaller, we'll say maybe Israel went and carried out an airstrike on an underground nuclear facility in Iran, like they did to Iraq in the 80s. What you would have is a lot of missile attacks from Iran on U.S. Positions throughout Syria and Iraq primarily, and a lot of attacks being directed at Israeli cities. Iron Dome would catch some of them, but there would be such a huge attack, especially if Iran coordinated with Hezbollah and uh, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, Hamas, and so forth. Iron Dome couldn't save them, and that's why the scary thing is that as long as Israel has nukes, if they think clearly they can, you can see Israel does not give a flying f what the rest of the world thinks about them committing atrocities. They will massacre children and tread on their bodies gleefully in front of a CNN camera because they know they can get away with it. They don't care about killing people. So if they felt like they faced some existential threat, I don't think they would hesitate to use a nuke because they don't care. They don't care about life in the way that a lot of other civilized countries do. But realistically, I think that the most realistic scenario would be Iran trying to avoid direct war with the USA. United States would be uh, trying to hit Iran with cruise missiles, trying to soften them up, and say, "Look, you're in trouble." I think we would flood troops into the region, but they'd have to fight all over. They'd have to fight in Syria and Iraq and everywhere else. It would be a situation where Russia would get involved, most likely. I mean, they could try and stay out of it, but for their own self-preservation. But it seems unlikely with that much going on that Putin would sit on the sidelines of history and not get involved. So you're looking at World War III, a massive death toll, because you would have the outbreak of other things. China would move to seize Taiwan. You could probably have Pakistan and India trying to settle grudges. You'd have a world war. You'd have multiple theaters. And that's why I keep telling people we have got to get this problem with Israel and Palestine resolved, because as long as the conflict remains alive, as long as there's no peace between them, it has the potential to set off the next world war. And a world war would collapse economies. The United States would suffer irreparable harm to our economy. We'd go back to Great Depression uh, levels of poverty. Trade would be cut off. Saudi Arabia would be pulled in. They would cut off the petrodollar status. So we'd have to go to war with Saudi Arabia to steal their oil, which wouldn't be hard to beat them. But uh, still, an occupying force, you would have nonstop guerrilla warfare with the local populations everywhere we went. It would be an absolute nightmare scenario. I don't think that is the likely outcome of this, but we have not had the lesson that I have learned from my studies of the build up to World War II, is while something may be highly unlikely, when you have the right combination of extremism, of extremist ideology in key positions of power, what is normally unlikely becomes far more likely, far more possible because of those radical elements. The radical Nazi ideology was way different from even the German ideology of World War One. You know, Germans really got a bad rap for World War One. World War One was well, so was World War Two, but World War One was really just about colonial expansion by the West, trying to grab lands and stuff like that. The UK was afraid of Germany's rising power. Germany was challenging the British as the size of their military might. They were threatening the security of the British Empire by the growth of their economy and their military. And so you needed pretext for the Brits and the French to go to war with Germany. And there were a lot of unintended consequences from that. The crippling and very unjust Treaty of Versailles just guaranteed. In fact, the Treaty of Versailles was not really it wasn't an armistice. It wasn't an end to a war. It was a 20-year ceasefire that had a deadline. There was no question that Germany was going to end up back at war again with the very heavy-handed, abusive, unjust treatment that Germany got at the end of World War One. The way that they were hit with reparations and territory losses, and the humiliation. The French, especially, were brutal, brutal against the Germans, far more than the Americans or the British even. And we even had the Western leaders saying, you know, France, this is too much. But France got its way, and in the end, that resulted in the Nazis marching into Paris. So when you have an unjust situation like that, what was done to Germany? You look now at the Palestinians and what was done to them after 1948, taking land when you had a clear, overwhelming Arab majority in the land, and you take their rights to their own lands away from them and give it to colonizers. And then those colonizers, with the help of other colonial states around the world, help to keep the, combat boot on the side of the head of the Palestinian people, while the thugs go around looting the homes, taking the territory, abusing the women and children. It's not gonna, you can't get away with that. There's gonna be blowback. And that's what Americans and other people in the West don't get. Now, if you were to change the scenario around and say, let's come up with a hypothetical. What if XYZ was done to the United States by China? I wouldn't stand for that. I'd pick up my gun and I'd do this, and those Chinese and blah, blah, blah. That would never happen here because we'd fight back. Uh-huh. Well, the scenario I just described to you is exactly what Israel is doing to the Palestinians. But you don't think they have a right to resist? You hypocrite? Anyway, sorry, I'm ranting. I'm going to wrap it up, guys. It's almost midnight here, so thank you. Oh, and Johnny English, thank you. Thank you for your donation. And for the person with pm.me, thank you for your donation. I try not to read off names or anyone who may be trying to remain anonymous. I don't want to betray anything like that. All right, thank you guys. I'll be back in the next day or two with another show. We'll talk some more about other things. You're welcome to put in the um, comments ideas on topics you'd like me to cover, and we can talk about those things. And you're welcome to share your thoughts on anything I've said. You're welcome to disagree completely, but please be respectful, because I I just don't let people walk all over me. Like I said, I'm cool with people disagreeing if you do it in a civil way, in the way that you would do if we were just sitting around having a friendly discussion, debate. Be nice. Otherwise, I'll just delete your comment and block you so you never get to comment again. Thank you, everyone. I appreciated your participation in the chat. Thank you to the moderators, Katie Cat, Political Foolishness, Callie Girl. Who else did we have? Flick Off. And I'm sure there's Political Foolishness. Thank you to everyone who helped out. Love you guys. Appreciate you. And I'll talk to you next time.